Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Did you know that eating sugar can actually shrink your brain? Hey everyone, welcome to episode 21 of the Holistic Living Podcast. Today we are talking about the impacts that consuming sugar frequently has on our brain, and honestly, it's not great. Now, before I dive in, I don't want to scare you guys off from ever having a treat here or there. This is more educational and geared towards the people who are consuming high amounts of sugar and where sugar is more of a staple in the diet rather than a treat. So don't let this stop you from enjoying some ice cream or something here or there. This is, again, something to think about if sugar is consumed in high amounts in your diet. We are seeing so many more mental health issues, cognitive issues, just issues around the brain in general. And I feel like a huge part of this is coming from diet, especially now that studies have confirmed the effects that sugar has on our brain. And like I said, these effects are quite intense. So I'm going to go over some of the things that will happen to our brain when we consume sugar. And just to start, in terms of some education, our brain uses more energy than any other organ in the body, and glucose, sugar, is its primary source of fuel. But what happens when the brain is exposed to an excessive amount of sugar in the standard American diet? In this case, more is definitely not better. The effects of sugar on the brain can include impaired cognitive skills and decreased self-control. For many people, having a little sugar will stimulate a craving for more. And another effect are drug-like effects in the reward center of the brain. So scientists have proposed that sweet foods, along with salty and fatty foods, can produce addiction-like effects in the human brain, driving the loss of self-control, overeating, and subsequent weight gain. High blood glucose levels can affect the brain's functional connectivity, which links the brain's regions that share functional properties and brain matter. So it can actually cause the brain to atrophy or shrink. And it can lead to small vessel disease, which restricts blood flow in the brain, causing cognitive difficulties, so the memory loss, hard time recalling, and if severe enough, spurring the development of vascular dementia. So glucose is a form of sugar, and like I said, it is the primary source of energy for every cell in our body. And because the brain is so rich in nerve cells and neurons, it is the most energy demanding organ, using 1/2 of all the sugar energy in the body. Now, this is important to know, and the reason why I wanted to touch on this topic today is because we are going back to school in a few weeks, and it is really important to pay attention to what our children are consuming at school. And obviously this is for adults as well. But the reason why I was really thinking about this topic today and to record this topic today was because seeing children who are struggling in school and who just can't seem to get good grades, or children who are really hyperactive or are just not performing the way we know they should be, when you look at their diets, their lunch, and I made an Instagram post on this, their lunch is full of sugar and carbs. And, you'll see like Kool-Aid and a fruit roll-up and some cookies. And then for their main of their lunch, it's a peanut butter and jam sandwich. All of this is carbs, it's sugar, it's very, 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 very little protein and healthy fats. And this isn't to judge anyone or make anyone feel like they're not doing a good enough job if, their children are consuming these things. But what I'm trying to do is help maybe shift the way we see lunches at school, or even lunches as an adult for yourself. Really see it as an opportunity to fuel your brain rather than creating the environment in our body where it actually can cause damage to the brain. I have seen even my son, sometimes he goes to school and they'll have like pizza day at school. and everyone will have a freezy and all these things. And within one day, he would have consumed a lot of sugar. And sure enough, those are the days where he doesn't perform as well on his tests at school, where he's way more hyperactive and where his mood is really affected and his memory is affected. And that's just from one day of consumption. If this goes on and on and on every day, they're kind of getting the same junky foods or high carb, high sugar foods, it can really cause long-term mental health effects. And so that's what I wanted to share today. So let's continue on. In early humans, this stimulus that we're talking about here, this reaction that you get from eating sugar, would help lead them to calorie-rich foods, which would aid in their survival when food was scarce. But now this primitive drive contributes to our epidemics of obesity and diabetes. So when we eat sugar and then we have this urge to consume more of it, this is causing major health issues in America. The behavioral and neurobiochemical characteristics of substance abuse and overeating are quite similar, and the idea of food addiction is gaining ground among many scientists. So in this podcast, we're going to discuss the effects that sugar has on the brain, including its impact on the reward response, and we're also going to cover how it affects memory, mood, and cognition. All right, so high glycemic foods have been found to activate regions of the brain associated with the reward response, and it'll provoke a more intense feeling of hunger than low glycemic foods. So foods that cause a higher elevation in blood sugar or blood glucose produce a greater addictive drive in the brain. So eating a piece of bread compared to quinoa, you're going to have a much higher glycemic load on the body, and that will become more addictive. It's why we love eating breads and so much carby food. If you ask someone, do you want some quinoa or a sweet potato, or are we wanting French fries and poutine and things like that? Of course, they're going to go for the junkier things. Obviously, taste is a huge factor here, but the biggest thing is that addiction to the high glycemic foods. The glycemic index is just a way of classifying carb-containing foods and to estimate how quickly they are digested and their potential for increasing blood sugar levels. So the various types of carbs are processed differently in the body. Some will cause rapid spikes and dips in blood sugar, and then others will lead to slower, just a more gradual increase and decline in our blood sugar. And that's what we want. So typically, if we are to have carbs, we want to stick to complex carbs that are not going to impact our blood sugar so intensely. So high glycemic foods are typically those with like a high value on the glycemic index. These are typically digested the quickest. They'll cause the highest increase in blood glucose levels. And some examples are your processed foods, so your granola bars and things like that, and cereals, high sugar foods, cereals, donuts, white bread, potatoes, pasta, things like that. Your low glycemic foods are the ones that are going to have a longer breakdown, so it'll help people control blood sugar levels better and therefore weight. And it also can reduce the risk for health conditions like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So some great examples of low GI foods are going to be vegetables, fruit, nuts, legumes. These are more complex carbs, quinoa, buckwheat, etc. Okay, so moving on, sugar causes addiction-like responses. Additional studies on brain activity have provided evidence supporting the idea that overeating can actually alter our brain reward system, which will then just further drive the overeating that we see. The same process is thought to underlie the tolerance associated with addiction. So over time, greater amounts of the substance is required to reach the same level of reward. So for someone who can handle a little bit of sugar and feel good, the next time and the next time and the time after that, they're going to need more and more of that sugar, more volume of it to have that same feeling. And that's kind of how addictions to drugs and other things work as well. Someone will start off with a cigarette a day, and then before you know it, they're up to a pack a day. Studies imply that overeating results in a diminished reward response and a progressively worsening addiction to low nutrient foods rich in sugar, salt, and fat. There's so many studies to back all of this up. It's actually incredible to see how much education there is out there around sugar, but how little anyone is doing to actually try to limit the consumption of it. One thing that really is important for me is the fact that sugar has really negative effects on our memory. So in addition to sugar's negative effects on the brain, it also harms the entire body. Every single instance of elevated glucose in the blood can be harmful to the brain, resulting in slow cognitive function, deficits in memory, problems with attention, and inflammation in the brain. Now, just to stay on the problems with attention for a moment, again, children in school who are eating sugar for every snack and every meal there, but then can't sit in a classroom and they're jumping off the walls and don't want to do their school and are having bad attitudes, it's not the child's fault. It's the way that the body's reacting to the foods they are being fed and given. So it is so important to really look at the nutrition of our children. And if your child is getting fed at school, and you're not happy with what they're eating at school, trying to make as many changes as you can. Send them with some clean snacks. Even if you can't afford to send them with a full school lunch from home, or if you don't have time, at least know that they're, send them with some hard-boiled eggs or some kind of protein snack. So at least they're getting some amount of protein and their whole day is not just going to be carb heavy or sugar heavy. And doing this consistently should really improve their mood. Inflammation in the brain can contribute to further memory difficulties. A 2016 study that was published in Behavioral Brain Research found inflammatory markers in the hippocampus of rats that were fed a high sugar diet, but not in those that were fed a standard diet. The good news, however, is that this inflammatory damage from sugar may not be permanent. A 2017 study in the journal Appetite found that the memory damage caused by sugar consumption can be reversed by following a low sugar, low GI diet. Before I continue, I don't want to make this topic about gut health because that's not what we're talking about today. But when you have brain inflammation from sugar, you do definitely get gut inflammation because of that vagal nerve as well. So do keep that in mind, that your child might have, or yourself, whoever's consuming the sugar, might have that inflammation in the brain, but it's probably going to cause a lot of gut inflammation, which can cause more food allergies or sensitivities, can cause stomach issues, and can cause more brain inflammation, because if the gut's inflamed, the brain gets more inflamed, and you're stuck in this feedback loop. So in addition, research published in the journal Nutrients in 2015 found reducing sugar consumption and supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids and curcumin improved working memory. So it is so important to get yourself or your kids on fish oil. And if you're already consuming really good, high quality, wild caught fatty fish frequently, you might not need to supplement, but this is for those who aren't really getting those omega-3 fats. I would highly recommend a good fish oil. So sugar also affects our mood. Another serious effect of sugar on the brain is how it triggers different reactions in terms of our mood. Such reactions or effects might include compromised emotional processing. So in healthy young people, the ability to process emotion is compromised with elevated blood glucose. And this was confirmed by a brain imaging study. Another effect is increased anxiety. So another study published in Diabetes Care found that people with type 2 diabetes reported increased sadness and anxiety during acute hyperglycemia, so elevated blood sugar. And only in an acute status. It doesn't even need to be chronic. Higher risk for depression was another one. So one of the large studies to link sugar with depression was done. And an analysis of dietary consumption and mood of over 23,000 individuals enrolled in the study found higher rates of sugar consumption were associated with greater incidence of depression. Guys, everybody I talked to today has depression. Everyone I talk to has depression to some degree. Why is everyone so depressed and so down now more than ever? Obviously, social media plays a huge role in that. The crazy expenses of our world that no one else had to deal with before us plays a role in that. There's so many things, but a huge thing, a big connection here has to be sugar. When every aisle in the grocery store is all sugar, and when you're checking out at grocery stores and gas stations and everywhere is chocolate bars and sugar. When people get together for game nights, movie nights, it's sugar. Everywhere we go is sugar, sugar, sugar. Even our coffees are loaded with sugar. So how is this not affecting everyone? It absolutely is. Studies have confirmed it. And the more that we continue to go on as a society, prioritizing sugar in everything, we are going to just have more and more and more mental health cases. The study published in 2017 in the journal Scientific Reports found those with the highest level of sugar consumption were 23% more likely to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder than those with the lowest sugar intakes. So sugar intake will actually hinder your mental capacity. Elevated blood glucose will harm blood vessels, and blood vessel damage is the major cause of the vascular complications of diabetes, leading to other problems such as damage to blood vessels in the brain and eyes, causing retinopathy. Studies of long-term diabetics show progressive brain damage leading to deficits in learning, memory, motor speed, and other cognitive functions, which is really serious. Frequent exposure to high glucose levels diminishes mental capacity, as higher HbA1c levels have been associated with a greater degree of brain shrinkage. People with PCOS, with insulin resistance, they have usually elevated HbA1c. Even in those without diabetes, higher sugar consumption is associated with lower scores on tests of cognitive function. These effects are thought to be due to a combination of hyperglycemia, hypertension, insulin resistance, and elevated cholesterol. This is just like mind-blowing information, and I just want everyone to hear this. So please share this podcast with friends and family so that they can really understand the effects that sugar has on our brain, even if it's not consumed every day. Okay, additional research shows that a diet high in added sugar reduces the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, also known as BDNF, a brain chemical essential for new memory formation and learning. Lower levels of BDNF are also linked to dementia and Alzheimer's disease, according to a study published in the journal Diabetologia. That was a tongue twister. At the end of all this, I just want you guys to realize that eating sugar is dangerous. By having added sugar in our food is dangerous. You can't buy cereals now without some degree of added sugar, and you can't buy drinks or even chips. Like everything that we buy is added sugar, and then on top of that, we're eating more starchy carbs than we should be. We can avoid these dangers by satisfying our sweet tooth with a fresh piece of fruit in place of refined sugar, or something like a treat made with liquid stevia. Doing something, swapping our starchy carbs like our potatoes and our breads for complex carbs, squashes, sweet potatoes, legumes. Eating fresh fruit provides the satisfying sweetness of sugar, but you're not getting all of the negative side effects of the sugar. Now, I know it's easier said than done. And again, it's not to say that we should never enjoy sugary foods, because God knows I love my sweet treats. I have a sweet tooth and I love to go get some gelato or a treat here or there, but it is so far and few between. It's not something that's a staple like it used to be in my life. And that was one of the things I noticed helped me the most with my anxiety, with my depression, with my mood. When I was in university, I would know some information inside out. By the time I got to the test, I'd forget all of it. And why? Well, always right before a test, because they were so long and tedious, I'd be filling my body with all of the gummy worms and the sugary foods and drinks to try to stay awake, not realizing it's actually ruining my memory. And by the time I get to the test, I could not think of anything, even a simple question. And I had no idea, no clue. As I got through my later years of university, when I started changing my health, my scores went up a lot more. And I started to realize at that point that I was just destroying my brain by eating so much sugar. And this is not information that is something that we think is happening. We know it happens. It is confirmed by countless studies, and it's definitely something to take seriously, especially with all the cases of dementia and Alzheimer's and all of that. So I hope that this was informational. I hope it didn't come across as pressuring or anything. I just like to share information and really point out the urgency of some of the information and the importance. But of course, you can take it and run with it how you will. I hope you guys share this podcast with your friends and family so we can educate more people on the negative effects of sugar. And if you or someone you know is struggling with depression, hyperactivity, anxiety, cognition or memory issues, maybe mention to them and have them look into what they're eating day to day. If they're eating a lot more starchy carbs or sugary carbs, have them maybe eat some more complex carbs and increase their protein. See if that helps them over time. Anyway, thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are listening from, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.